Welcome to 2024, and for whatever reasons, there's a lot of people who have decided that the mask has to come off. Just reveal everything. Say the quiet parts out loud, and don't hold anything back, including this absolutely innocent company known as Sweet Baby Incorporated. Let's take a look at what they have to say for themselves. Founded in 2018, Sweet Baby Inc. is a narrative development and consultation studio based in Montreal and working around the globe. Our mission is to tell better, more empathetic stories while diversifying and enriching the video games industry. We aim to make games more engaging, more fun, more meaningful, and more inclusive for everyone. Well, that is interesting. A consultation company. And look at this. The good people at Sweet Baby played a part in the development of God of War Ragnarok, specifically as having worked on narrative and character consultation, with a focus on representation. Well, now, wasn't that nice of them? And, as we all know, there are no woke things in God of War Ragnarok. Or at least the whole commentary community would have me believe. There is no woke in my slop, and I would be paranoid to assume otherwise. Am I right, ladies and gentlemen? But I seem to recall some YouTubers who had the audacity to notice things. People like Synthetic Man and Griffin Gaming, who pointed out there was wokeness in God of War Ragnarok. More like God of War Ragnarok. Well, let us take a look at the game and try to figure out what exactly this woke stuff is all about. And here we see a young black girl. This is a new character introduced to the game named Angrboda. Obviously nothing is wrong with this. After all, black people were everywhere in 5th century Scandinavia. And we're also aware that at least 13% of the Norse gods were black. It's just common knowledge. Only a racist or a bigot would think otherwise. Also, the game features a variety of mythological creatures and other outlandish nonsense. Why are people negging on this young black girl? Now, I am incredibly autistic and have no capacity to think for myself at times like this. So, naturally, I must reach out to YouTube's commentary community and have some of the most popular people on YouTube do my thinking for me.
The only thing I could possibly come up with that people might take issue with is Angrboda, who looks a bit out of place in a story that's all about Norse mythology, but in the context of interdimensional realm travel, wildly exotic landscapes, cultures, different races, and even species, a few characters with different skin tones is probably the least unusual thing you're going to see.
Well, there you have it. Elves, trolls, black people, they all pretty much fit under the same category of weird shit in my Norse mythology video game.
And it's not like she's even used to make some awkward point about contemporary social issues. She's just a character who's there to fill you in on some backstory, and that's pretty much it. I guess my point here is that while it's important to call out divisive identity politics in media, it doesn't mean that it exists everywhere. And if you start trying to find it where it doesn't really exist, it just becomes a witch hunt that spoils your enjoyment of stuff you might otherwise end up loving. Sometimes it's okay to acknowledge that even modern productions can just be, well, good.
You know, it's hard to believe this was what people were saying not too long ago. And then, all of a sudden, everyone was like, well, damn, I'm on the wrong side of history. Better hope my stupid viewers aren't aware my faux pas by crapping on the company who was involved in the game I praised only a few years back. And by the way, this isn't even a question as to whether or not Angrboda should even be a white person, since she is supposed to be a Jotun, which is basically the equivalent of a giant or a troll. She probably shouldn't even look like a human. Now, maybe you're wondering, what's the big deal? Why does anyone care about whether or not this character is a black girl? Why would anyone point at this and say, this character is woke? Well, rather than refer to the incredibly useful commentary community on YouTube, I'm going to refer to the mouth of the horse. That is to say, I will go to the horse's mouth. Specifically, the CEO of Sweet Baby herself. Maybe she will tell me exactly what they are doing.
We do narrative development in games and kind of beyond, and we try to bring a lot of inclusion, diversity, and new ideas kind of to the industry. And we cannot continue to try to create art under a system that is going to bar innovation for fear of a picky baby throwing a tantrum. Hey, maybe we can invite white dudes to play as other people and experience different things through someone else's eyes. And if they don't like it, we have to start thinking we're not losing, they're losing, and we're losing because we're going to let them stand in the way of our progress and our innovation. Because ultimately, I think that is what we need to figure out. It's how to bring these discussions out and make innovations in content like the way we make them everywhere else in our industry. We have the power to go like, oh, we can build choices that consider, marginalized identities and just write them into our work. We can decide to tell stories that present very rare narratives and representative experiences. And we can kind of work on detokenizing our minority characters. And so in that way, we do have like a lot of power to actually affect the change that we want to see and to work all of these concepts in our material as narrative developers.
Oh, wait, what is this? I thought this was a consultation company, but apparently they do far more than that. They innovate. They fundamentally change what the product is. Well now, this gives cause for me to wonder why people keep on telling me that modern storytelling in video games is completely organic. I thought there was no woke in my slop. Perhaps the last 2 years were all a lie. Now this lecture is full of all kinds of bizarre nonsense. Kim Belair talks about an experience she had when she first played the game Mass Effect 2. Specifically, she talks about the utter joy she felt at creating a black character and having her player character interact with another black character in the game. It was like a dopamine hit for her. But the key part of her story is that she says her dopamine hit was only incidental, meaning it only came about due to the choices she made at character creation. Now, of course, that kind of freedom is a problem in her eyes. She says she doesn't want such interactions to be incidental. She wants players to be forced into these interactions because representation is cool. Yes, you heard me right. Sweet Baby wants to remove the player's freedom of choice in video games because representation is cool.
The general idea was, holy moly, representation is cool. But in my Mass Effect experience, this is almost an accidental form of representation because it's something that's a possibility. It's not guaranteed for any player depending on the kind of character and the Commander Shepard that you make. So I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if this wasn't an accident, but it was actually the intention of the game designers? What if they actually said, you know what, we're going to set out to create a moment of joy in people who look like this, people who feel represented by this. And that, I think, would be amazing, and it's totally possible for us, because these are things that we can actually create as designers and as writers and as creators, and not only are they new, but they're very, very narratively compelling, and I think that that's ultimately what we should strive for.
You just need to accept it. It will be forced upon you. Wow. This really recolors my perspective. No pun intended. And here I thought this was obvious, that the majority of people who play games enjoy the ability to make their own choices. It's this little thing called freedom. Perhaps you've heard of it. Forced inclusion or forced representation would be detrimental to that. Or at least, I would assume so. But then again, I am no expert. Part of what makes this bizarre is Kim refers to something as mundane as watching two black people have a conversation in a video game, like it is seeing the face of God. Moreover, she thinks everyone else needs to experience the same dopamine hit that she did. When they play their games, they ought to be forced into it. To her, it's all innovative. Her personal experience must also be everyone else's experience, whether they want it in their video games or not. Not every demographic has this super niche desire to be forcefully represented by their video games. This may be a novel concept, but I believe most of the people playing video games just want to have fun playing video games. But Kim's idea of consultation on a video game is just projecting her own desire onto everyone else who will have played the game Sweet Baby was involved in. She thinks everyone else is looking for the same moments of joy that she is. No doubt she and others at Sweet Baby will readily tell you that they care so much about marginalized people or about diversity. But in the end, they're really just focused on themselves and their own limited perspectives. They're egotistical. They truly believe that not only should you see and acknowledge all this blatant wokeness, but you should accept it, and it should turn you on. The utter nerve of these people.
And for those of you who don't know, Jacob is a black man. He's a Marine. And he's your first kind of like point of contact. So your first interaction with him, you're like crouching behind cover and you're having like a close quarters conversation. And when this happened in the game, it was this really powerful and remarkable moment for me because it was two black characters talking one-on-one, and neither of them is cast as a criminal. They're not a sidekick, they're not a savage, they're not a stereotype, they're not a gang member. And they're the only two people on screen in this moment talking about something much greater than them. And it was just like really, really, really nice.
Need it be said, not everyone experiences joy the same way, especially since joy comes in all colors and flavors. Your source of joy should not be inflicted upon other people because not everyone will like what you like. Not every person is going to witness two black people having a conversation in Mass Effect 2 and feel what Kim felt. Not everyone plays a video game looking for such a niche moment as that, but Sweet Baby doesn't care. They are going to force said moments into your video games just because, apparently, the joys that they feel are the only joys worth having. What's more, they are going to project their niche desires onto a product intended for people who are not them. This is how people easily point to a product and declare, I do believe this thing has wokeness in it. Now, I want to go to about 17 minutes 45 seconds into Kim's lecture, because this is where things get really incredibly bonkers. Kim references her marketing degree almost as a flex. This is interesting because this is something she has in common with feminist frequencies Anita Sarkeesian.
Hi, my name is Anita Sarkeesian. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and my website is neonandchrome.com. And I just want to let you all know how amazing Alex's teleseminar secrets was. It really motivated me to get my own business started. In my current day job, I saw how teleseminars could change the face of your business and make a lot of money, but I didn't really understand how it worked. And I'm only 23, and I've already started my own business promoting teleseminars for small businesses around me, and it's really made a huge impact on my life.
In essence, this makes Kim a scam artist. The reason for this, as she herself will go into more detail, is because she is fully aware that media companies are afraid of backlash. Media companies do not want to risk being unfairly labeled or scandalized, and so this is why they even reach out to companies like Sweet Baby in the first place. The reason this is a scam is because what people like Kim Belair or Anita Sarkeesian do is create a self-fulfilling prophecy by inducing fear of being called racists, bigots, sexists, misogynists, etc. if a company does not adhere to their ideological dogmatic nonsense garbage.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
This is also why Sweet Baby is not the consultation company they promote themselves to be. They want to be the ones pulling the strings. They want to be the ones controlling where the story goes. In essence, they are parasites. And this isn't just me saying this. Kim talks about this quite clearly.
Put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want. Because they have to consider, like, I say that out as a joke, but it's actually very, very true, because if you start to consider the people who are player and audience facing and who have to deal with mitigating harm and with keeping the sentiment around their game and their project positive, there's like a genuine value that you can impress upon them with both ethically and financially. You can say this is important. Assume your players want new stories and treat representation as a facet of innovation, as a selling point. Leverage your game's ability to explore new perspectives. And there's always going to be a positive impact in assuming this. Because I think so often when people like us get told, you know, from higher ups or from society at large, this isn't what players want, it's not a conversation about content, it's a conversation about demographics. And I think that in our industry and in so many creative industries, if you want to look at film and television and any art form, we start treating our core demographics as a fixed and static value, something that does not want to change and something that is locked in place. So despite like the changing face of audiences, despite the changing face of conferences like this one, we still look at our core demographics and say, okay, they're white, cis, hetero males. And we cater almost exclusively to them.
I'm not even sure Kim knows that white males are not even the main demographic for video games in the first place. Many gamers are not from North America or Europe. Most gamers are from South America, Asia, and the Middle East. What's funny is from all around the world, people of all cultures can see what is going on with the video games industry and they recognize the wokeness well. The Chinese, in particular, enjoy calling this stuff baizuo. Sweet Baby do not seem to realize that nobody really wants to hear an entitled group of Canadians go off about the evils of toxic masculinity or white people. In general, the world is tired of hearing about it. Foreigners in particular don't care because it is not their problem, and it is definitely not the reason why they are playing video games. Now, I read an article from gamesindustry.biz concerning Angerboda, quoting Kim Belair on several occasions. Here is an excerpt. For God of War Ragnarok, Sweet Baby specifically worked on making Angerboda, depicted as a black character, more relatable to black audiences despite the game's Norse mythology setting. As a supporting character, there had been concerns that it would feel like Angerboda's purpose didn't matter in the grand scheme of the narrative. But rather than shy away from this, Belair says the solution was to make it, quote, more diegetic.
One of the things that we all face in our lives as marginalized people is the sense of, am I just a facet of someone else's existence? For me, looking at a black character in a game where she feels that same way, it will absolutely be seen and resonated with by people of color and by black girls who identify with Angerboda. So many places are afraid to even make a commentary on things because of some fear that mentioning something is bad, but not mentioning something is more uncomfortable.
Again, this is forced inclusion and forced representation. People weren't mistaken when they said Angerboda was obviously part of some wild, woke, virtue-signaling subversion, straight from the mouth of a horse. Or what I meant to say was from the horse's mouth. Now, why would I need some YouTube commentary community breaking this down for me when the good people at Sweet Baby are basically telling me how it is, all by themselves? This is all pretty much laid out in black and white, no pun intended. The video games industry are doing woke messaging. The games are indeed full of woke. This is happening. It cannot be denied. And to think, 2 years ago, the mainstream opinion was, this isn't happening. Stop it with your anti-woke paranoia.
It's not like she's even used to make some awkward point about contemporary social issues. While it's important to call out divisive identity politics in media, it doesn't mean that it exists everywhere. And if you start trying to find it where it doesn't really exist, it just becomes a witch hunt that spoils your enjoyment of stuff you might otherwise end up loving.
Now, in 2024, seemingly everyone is now on the other side of the fence. The whole damn online commentary community have egg on their faces, sticky yolk dribbling all over the place. But, as we can clearly see and hear, Kim Belair, the CEO of Sweet Baby herself, is absolutely acknowledging that Angerboda truly is an anomalous addition to God of War Ragnarok. It was all a ploy so that Kim could look at a character and see herself, and then force other people to look at a character that looked like her. Very much like what happened with Spider-Man 2. What's the deal with all these people just creating or editing characters to make them look like themselves?
It's only going to be about sadness and hurt, and not the ways that we are resilient or the ways that issues of systemic racism are simply realities. They will also say, it's not empowering if we don't show people overcoming these realities. But I don't think that even as a company owner existing under capitalism, what I'm doing is me by any means, overcoming capitalism, but it is me surviving and trying to thrive within it. I'd rather someone say, I am a black character, racism exists, here's how I live, instead of making it about racism a facet of my life, and it's all that I think about, and my whole arc is about making people less racist.
Gadzooks, what the hell did I just listen to? What the f*** is this woman going on about? It's like she sees herself as the main character in the story of life and everyone else is just an NPC. Come to think of it, that is exactly how she looks at the world. She is the hero of her own story, and everyone else is just a background character. The vanity of these people. So, Angerboda is basically Kim Belair. It is literally her. Everything about what she says about trying to do this naturally or organically is contradicted by every sentence that precedes it. Kim engages in all this double-speak nonsense, where she has your brain focused on one part of what she says the intent was. This part will be picked up by people like Kotaku and other woke journalists, who try to gaslight their readers into ignoring what comes out of the other side of these people's mouths. Angerboda is Kim's self-insert fanfic character she made so that all the people playing God of War Ragnarok could be forced to look at her. This entitled Canadian working as a consultant for a AAA game studio wants you to think that she is a victim of marginalized racism in a game about Norse mythology. She did this regardless as to whether or not it was organic or conducive to the story or setting. She refers to people as being marginalized and whatever. But what does that have to do with the story of God of War Ragnarok? Angerboda was made to represent a marginalized demographic simply because her skin is dark, but in the context of the world of the game she is in, how does that even work? Now, this isn't to say video games cannot have stories about marginalized people in them. In fact, some games illustrate the concept of marginalization quite well. Deus Ex, for example, is a game where some people have been augmented by cybernetic body parts, and given those circumstances, they represent a marginalized people in the game's setting. And so you see, marginalization is central to the story. However, in God of War Ragnarok, Sweet Baby Inc. is forcing something into the narrative that exists outside of the story and its setting. And as we've just read from this article in gamesindustry.biz, Kim Belair straight up admits this. All this nonsense garbage is why people recognize this as being obviously woke. Among some of the other ideas Kim promotes, she talks about getting out of advocacy. What she means by this is that she wants her forced inclusivity representation woke bluster to be institutionalized and made an integral part of how games are marketed. Quite the ambitious go-getter. Now, to better understand how this actually functions in the day-to-day, think of every instance where if you don't like something that is obviously woke, you are called a racist or a bigot. Often people see this name-calling as a shield against criticism, which it does serve in part. But this is also a marketing tool in and of itself.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
You see, consumers are constantly having to be put on the defensive against accusations of racism or bigotry. Someone gets riled up because their favorite video game series is woke, and someone on Twitter said he was racist for saying so. What do? Naturally, they make a video about it, or maybe they go shitposting about it on 4chan or something. This ensures people keep talking about the constant stream of woke slop coming out of the industry all the time. After all, negative press is still press. Hate watching is still watching. Ironically, this is how companies like Sweet Baby could stay in operation for as long as they have without anyone realizing what is going on, since the people within the industry, in addition to gaming journalists in bed with them, are constantly gaslighting people, putting them on the defensive and dividing them along a political spectrum. All online criticism is tarred, wrangled, and put into a corner where they can do the least damage. You've seen it over and over again. The petty online shit-flinging going on within YouTube's commentary community. On the face of it, how does all this infighting really stick it to the man and ensure good games and even good movies will be made in the future? The answer, it doesn't. It has all really just become its own form of entertainment at this point. This is what is really entailed by getting out of advocacy. It is institutionalized wokeness, which means you either enjoy the slop that is fed to you, or you're evil. There's no middle ground. In the end, the goal is to create a consumer base that feeds on low-quality slop, and they convince themselves that it's good and wholesome. Else they stand to be called racist if they complain and demand higher quality slop. This isn't being made up. Kim Belair straight up wants to revolutionize the industry.
We have the power to go like, oh, we can build choices that consider, marginalized identities and just write them into our work. We can decide to tell stories that present very rare narratives and representative experiences. And we can kind of work on detokenizing our minority characters.
That is confusing because tokenization is basically the same as this forced inclusion. But really, what Kim means here is she wants people to ignore the elephant in the room. So, simultaneously seeing Black Girl Angerboda is supposed to fill you with joy, but at the same time you're supposed to regard her as completely natural, and not at all someone who isn't supposed to exist within a Norse mythology setting. Proof in the pudding can also be found around the 23-minute mark of Kim's lecture, where she starts talking about how Sweet Baby needs to start affecting the culture subversively.
Assume your players want new stories and treat representation as a facet of innovation, as a selling point. Leverage your game's ability to explore new perspectives. And there's always going to be a positive impact in assuming this. Finally, if you're a studio building a team, hire diverse creators and pay them. Please pay them. None of what we're doing is about ticking boxes or about a veneer of wokeness. We actually have to care about making this stuff.
Part of this is taking away the player's freedom of choice and eventually putting one within a setting where everything one will ever see in your video games is forced representation bullshit. Kim's little Mass Effect dopamine trip is something she believes is revolutionary storytelling. Seeing two black people talking in a room together is the brave new world they want to unleash upon the gaming public. I don't know about you, but I don't feel very inspired. The terminology she uses to mark this dopamine hit is a moment of joy. This is what they're going to fill video games with, moments of joy. Black Girl Angerboda is just one example, but one could also reference that one side quest about two gay dwarves and their rainbow bonfire. They're outright doing things which are not conducive to organic storytelling. These are literally me things, injected in media for the sake of stoking the endorphins of a niche ideologue. In short, this is pandering. This is fan service. It doesn't do anything for the story. It has nothing to do with the setting. It's just there so that some can see another on his television screen and point at them like Leo DiCaprio and say, "That's me. That's literally me." Now, remember, Kim has a marketing degree. She knows fully well how easily consumers can be manipulated. Anita Sarkeesian worked the same way. Kim knows the market is infested with autistic low-attention span morons who really are just looking for the next literally me dopamine hit. The whole idea of moments of joy is already heavily prevalent in today's market. So this thing of injecting woke virtue signaling in video games makes sense from that perspective. Even YouTube's commentary community conflates good storytelling with a dopamine rush. Golly, it's like every conversation about Batman has to have that one guy who is obliged to tell you the Joker is voiced by Mark God and Hamill. Or the Ahsoka TV series shoving Anakin Skywalker into it via some magic bullshit because they knew fanboys would hoop and holler at literally Darth Vader on my TV screen. You can't tell me this stuff isn't set up to do this same moments of joy thing that Sweet Baby does. Every movie today is structured like a 2-hour commercial promoting itself. Marketers know fans are looking at trivia, at their Wikipedias, looking at the lore, and they realize all they need to do is feed them a generic end-of-the-world plot as they plant Easter egg references everywhere. In the end, this leaves one's audience in a state where all they know is their franchise still exists and it's totally popular, and they should buy a bunch of toys to line their bedroom walls. So, yes, even if you play a video game or watch a movie or do some other kind of media engagement that, quote, makes you feel good, that says nothing about your self-ascribed role as some kind of expert in media. It just means it made you feel good because it hit that dopamine center. Marketers tailored it specifically for you and your tastes, so you can literally me all over the place. We can recognize it when it's something pandering to the woke crowd, but the masses don't really recognize it elsewhere. A lot of folks bandwagoning the current backlash against Sweet Baby had nothing to say when The Last of Us TV show devoted an episode to 2 gay men. There was also the transgender bathrooms in the Dead Space remake. I know there was some backlash, of course, but nothing on the level we're seeing with Sweet Baby right now. It is really the same kind of cultural subversion all around. Wokeness has been built directly into the marketing. It has indeed been institutionalized. Ultimately, what Sweet Baby is doing is literally kneeing themselves through video games. Look there. Angraboda is a black girl. She is literally me, and I am Kim Belair.
If you're in creative development, if you're building a world and a story and you're including characters and concepts that are borrowed or inspired by or based on the lives and the lived experiences of marginalized people, firstly, I would say do not be afraid to create moments that are intentionally targeted and designed to create joy in the marginalized. They are going to appreciate this on a level that your core audience won't, but it doesn't mean that you're going to exclude your core audience in doing that. Do not make it so that marginalized people, when they're playing your game, have to do all of the work to create representation themselves by creating that custom character. And also, don't fall into this trap that I think a lot of people fall into, which is they think, okay, don't worry. We can include everyone by making this like single default universal experience that is universally representative. Because usually like all that means, as it did in the dating example, is that you're aiming at your core demographic and you're probably invisibly leaning towards the dominant societal voice, even if you don't realize it.
See, she doesn't want people to have the ability to make certain choices because it impedes Sweet Baby's silly, subversive, innovative story inoculations. Moreover, the market speech is pretty wacky and makes the entire ordeal come across like the art being consumed truly is just a heap of slop at day's end. It's just there to induce some endorphic response, like playing a video game is the same as vaping. This kind of language implies modern art is just a disposable product, like picking up fast food at a drive-thru. That's highly ironic considering Kim compares her main demographic to picky eaters. Nevertheless, Sweet Baby believes it is their moral duty to ensure forced inclusionary diarrhea continues to slump out of the anus of the video game industry. Yes, indeed. And they also believe marketing teams must follow Sweet Baby's instructions in order to maintain their ethical purity.
Put this stuff up to your higher-ups. And if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want. Because they have to consider, like, I say that a lot as a joke, but it's actually very, very true because if you start to consider the people who are player and audience facing and who have to deal with mitigating harm and with keeping the sentiment around their game and their project positive, there's like a genuine value that you can impress upon them with both ethically and financially. You can say this is important.
That's right. When you're marketing your games, you need to listen to what we tell you or people might think you're racist. Now pay us money. This is basically what they're saying. They even go so far as to assert that diverse collaborators are necessary. How is a consultant telling people what they are morally obliged to do? This is straight up subverting the industry. Hell, they even say representation needs to be a facet of storytelling, and it isn't even optional because Sweet Baby insists it is a need. In fact, Kim even says it is something that must be leveraged. Ridiculous. So, the long and short of it is, just do it. Go full Monte. Don't even think about holding back. Vomit wonky woke virtue signaling all over the screen and tell your audience that if they don't lap it up like good little doggies, then they're all morally suspect. This is insane, but it is, sadly, the way things are. And now you know why there are no good video games anymore.